Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, President Bush takes his war of words against Iran to the Middle East.
Iran is today the world's leading state sponsor of terror.
And runs into some media roadblocks. The video war games that are putting children on the moral firing line. The end of the new French news channel that Sarkozy says isn't French enough. And Bill Gates looks at life after Microsoft.
Right now.
Welcome back. President Bush's tour of the Middle East might have been pushed out of pole position in the U.S. news media by saturation coverage of the American primaries, but it certainly grabbed the attention of the media in the region. George Bush toured 6 Arab states and Israel, but the subplot written by the White House was all about Iran. And the administration's spin machine found itself outside its comfort zone, at the mercy of a largely hostile Arab media. Almost 5 years after the invasion of Iraq, how open were the Middle Eastern media to the American president's message? That's our starting point this week. George Bush, the media, and the anti-Iranian roadshow. In the news game, the story always starts with a headline.
We begin this evening with the historic visit of U.S. President George W. Bush to Israel.
President Bush has called on Israel to end what he called its occupation of Arab lands.
George Bush made a bold prediction, saying he believes Israelis and Palestinians will sign a peace treaty in the next 12 months.
Palestinians, looking past the headlines, though, into the fine print of the story, were not so optimistic.
Tough words from President Bush. However, he also stated that past UN resolutions concerning Palestine are null and void. And he proposed to replace the right of return of refugees with compensation. With these statements, all goodwill gestures from Bush went out of the window. Arab media, with no exception, went on saying that Bush gave Israel everything and the Palestinians nothing.
They liked it for a minute or two, but then it failed on deaf ears because, as a matter of fact, he did not come with anything new. So, did the media really find his trip to the Arab world newsworthy? Yes. Was it groundbreaking? No.
And then there are the unscripted moments, captured by the cameras, which also can be revealing.
A remark he made about whizzing through Israeli checkpoints on his way to Ramallah from Jerusalem attracted laughter and chuckles from reporters and diplomats alike.
You'll be happy to hear that my motorcade of a mere 45 cars was able to make it through without being stopped. But I'm not so exactly sure that's what happens to the average person.
However, this was not funny to Palestinians, many of whom experiencing long delays and humiliation on a daily basis while passing through the very same checkpoints. But in the US, this was viewed as one of many Bush's gaffes that the American media and American public have grown accustomed to.
The White House's plan was to start the tour talking about the Palestine-Israel issue, and then, when the president traveled to Abu Dhabi, shift the media's focus to Iran. However, the news agenda changed because of this videotape, which emerged before the tour began. The Pentagon said it showed 5 small Iranian speedboats threatening to attack American warships. The U.S. media went with the story.
Iran in an incident the U.S. military considers a, quote, significant provocative act. Iranian Revolutionary Guard gunboats provoked 3 U.S. Navy warships in the Strait of Hormuz on Sunday.
Now the question is, what were the Iranians up to? Why did they take the U.S. Navy on in international waters? Again, one official is saying this incident is significant. They are very concerned about what has happened. Alina?
I know Pentagon officials are watching this very closely. No shots fired, nobody killed. That is the good news, but certainly a close call. And again, lots of questions.
In the U.S. media, the initial confrontation, such that it existed, was reported in terms of facts. Literally, you know, who did what when, and some explanation of why.
But on day 2 of the president's trip, it became clear that the videotape was not what it was purported to be. Iranian TV reported the tape had been tampered with to create the false impression of a showdown. The Pentagon effectively disowned the videotape.
Those correspondents that look specifically at defense issues or U.S.-Iran relations took a much more analytical approach. And the reason that skepticism and analysis crept in is simply because there's talk around Washington about the Bush administration looking for an excuse to launch a preemptive attack against the Islamic Republic.
Now it is Iran's turn to release videotape supposedly showing this confrontation with U.S. warships in the Persian Gulf, or no confrontation as Iran spins it.
The entire incident, initially reported as fact by U.S. news channels, now made the U.S. military appear dishonest and bellicose while its commander-in-chief was in Palestine preaching peace.
More airtime was devoted to playing the speedboat encounter than to Bush's actual visit to Israel. And when the networks turned their attention, say, to Bush at a press conference in Jerusalem or in Ramallah, they would always go back to rolling video of the Iran incident.
Maybe it was the tale of the videotapes, perhaps it was the legacy of the Iraq War, but by the time President Bush got to Abu Dhabi, warning the mostly Sunni Gulf states of the threat posed by Shiite Iran, normally placid elements of the print media in the Gulf weren't buying. In an open letter to the American president, the Dubai-based Gulf News wrote, "We realize that containing Iran, selling more weapons, and securing more oil supplies are the main issues on your mind as you tour the region. As for the promise of democracy and human rights, your dreadful record on both gives you no moral right to lecture others." Even the state-controlled Saudi media was critical of President Bush. Just after the U.S. and Saudi Arabia agreed to a multi-billion-dollar weapons deal, Arab News, the government-controlled newspaper, quoted the Saudi foreign minister rejecting Mr. Bush's position on Iran. He said, "This is not the time for any provocation in the region."
The Bush administration really wished to rally the Gulf Arabs in particular, the majority of whom are Sunni rather than Shia, into an anti-Iran alliance. And he played on that sectarian divide, and he did so from the Gulf. In subtle and in some not so subtle ways, this was geared not only towards Iran as a state, but playing on the fears of the Sunni majority that Iran is a Shia state and is seeking hegemony throughout the Arab world, and in particular in the Gulf.
Had I been a media advisor to the president, I would have been very much disappointed, because they could not convince even Arab media, who are normally in their favor to so-called fight against the so-called terror. They did not. They actually said to him, "Do not come here warmongering and trying to put a wedge between Saudi Arabia or the Gulf and Iran."
And that's not the headline the White House was looking for. Our Global Village Voices now checking in with their thoughts on the coverage of the American president in the Middle East.
Definitely the Iranian media is winning the battle for hearts and minds. The Iranian government has got this powerful mass media. It's got programs in every language. It's got Al-Alam Iraqi TV. It's got Al-Manar in Lebanon. It's got Press TV in London. It's got all sorts of channels for Kurdish, for Serbian, for Bosnian, for Arabic channels, and it's doing a far, far more professional propaganda battle than the Americans are doing.
The unusually candid coverage, I think, can be attributed to the desire of officialdom in the Arab Gulf states to relay a message to the American of their unwillingness to be involved in the new crusade against Iran. It is a message that they may not like to deliver diplomatically, and so they are inspiring the press to do it.
Israeli reporters, like everybody else, have been talking of the lame duck President Bush. However, the editorial writers pointed out something a little different during his recent visit to Israel. They spoke of George Bush the man rather than George Bush the president, and they stressed that he's a man of high caliber, of high fiber, an ideologue who believes truly in what he's doing. Of course, they add the rider that he will be remembered as a failure, but that perhaps his legacy in a positive way could be the fact that he tried as best as he thought he could.
If you have issues, and many people do, with the way the global media do their job, email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. We have the technology to get you on the air as one of our Global Village voices. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. China watchers are keeping a close eye on the country's blogosphere in the wake of the violent death of citizen journalist Wei Wenhui. Wen Hui, a 41-year-old construction company executive, was spotted earlier this month filming villagers demonstrating in central China over the issue of a local waste dump. According to reports, he was attacked by up to 50 of the Chengguan, China's controversial urban management officials, and he was beaten to death. One comment posted on the Chinese blog known as RedNet wrote of the killing, "We can be silent no longer. We must speak out and ask who gave these Chengguan such absurd powers." The wife of detained Al Jazeera cameraman Sami al-Hajj says she's been told he's to be freed from Guantanamo Bay, where he's been held by the U.S. military since 2002. Al-Hajj has been on a hunger strike for the past 12 months and is said to be suffering from a catalog of ailments, including diabetes, kidney, and heart problems. Al-Hajj's detention without being charged has been criticized by Al Jazeera, among many others. Rumors that Al-Hajj would be released late last year came to nothing. U.S. authorities have a policy of not discussing releases from Guantanamo before they occur.
Watching France 24, stay with us.
French President Nicolas Sarkozy is saying au revoir to the state-funded global news channel France 24. France 24 broadcasts in English as well as 4 hours a day in Arabic and has been on the air for just a year now, but Sarkozy wants to turn it into a French-language news channel called France Monde. Sarkozy, a former communications minister, has said he doesn't want French taxpayers' money used for a channel that broadcasts in English. Employees at France 24 were startled by the sudden announcement, which bucks a global trend that has seen national channels in Britain, Germany, and Iran broadcasting in languages other than their own. We're in the thick of the 2008 U.S. presidential election campaign, and the Republican candidates have two words for you.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
The former U.S. president is considered royalty among candidates out to win the Republican nomination. They drop his name as often as they can. But at a recent debate in South Carolina, they were falling all over each other, getting in the R words at a quite ridiculous rate.
I work for Ronald Reagan. The Reagan Coalition.
Reagan Revolution.
Ronald Reagan.
Our thanks to the people at the U.S. Media Watch site, TalkingPointsMemo.com, for nailing that sequence together for us. Coming up after the break, the recruiting officer's new secret weapon, the military video game.